Hey there, Eric again. This is the part 3 of the series that I'm doing on the Catholic abuse crisis. I know it's been a few weeks now, and things seem to have calmed down a little bit with the news and everything as far as anything new coming out. I'm not really holding my breath if that's going to continue. But I wanted to get in this video just a little bit more about the context and why there's this big seems like it happens a lot more in the Catholic Church than others. And one of those is the difference in structure between the Catholic Church and the various Protestant denominations. Now you get, I'm sorry, I got to mute this a second. My Discord, it usually pops off on Sunday nights quite a bit. I'm in 2 different groups there, and it's good that they like to talk. It's not good when you're trying to do a video. Anyway, here we are. Difference in the structure. Now, in the last video, I spent some time addressing the way that the church's bureaucracy has been used against her, but also the Protestant structure, or the lack thereof, or the extent of the structure really varies depending a lot on from denomination to denomination. And essentially, the thing is, with a Protestant church, there's always that mentality that you can always just leave and start a new one. So if somebody sees something they don't like, oftentimes they and their friends, usually it will start off, they'll meet in the basement and have their own meetings to see if they can fix it. And then they'll decide no, and they'll pack up and leave and go start something different. Hence why we have so many different Protestant denominations. I won't get into the numbers and everything because I think it's fair to say that's a little misleading anyway. It's not really the point, though. Fact is, if they've got someone that they suspect of abuse, they can either just leave, or someone who's just creepy, they often just leave, or often he can be voted out, because Protestant denominations are typically led by the laity, the Joe Sixpack in the pew, essentially. And there's usually a board, group, elders, whatever they call them, in whichever particular church. And they can just go, you know what? We don't like you. You're creepy. You're weird. And they vote him out. Boom, he's gone. But there's not much to stop him from going to the next one down the street. Even if they come from a denomination that has a certain amount of structure, like, say, the Methodists, maybe they can stop him from getting a job at another Methodist church. But there's not much to stop him from going and starting and applying his trade at some, non-denominational place on the other end of town. Also, of course, they don't have the seal of the confessional. So they do actually, in this particular case, they can report it should they hear about it. Also, now that's should they hear about it. Without the seal of the confessional, of course, a pastor who is abusing isn't going to come right up and say, hey, isn't going to come and tell them that, which I think is a bigger point there. If they do hear about it, well, honestly, in the Catholic Church, if I hear about a priest who is abusive, I could go and say so. I can report that, obviously. And the Protestant Church, of course, can do the same. But they don't have that seal of the confessional. You're never going to know. No one is likely to ever know unless he sort of gets caught in the act. I don't know that that's either here nor there, to be honest. Just thought I'd throw it out there. Mostly it's the fact that they can just, that it's so easy to leave and start a new church that allows for people to sort of contain things to a degree. And also just the sheer number of different Protestant churches. Even if you've got one church that's got a really bad abuse problem going on, it's still a relatively small number of people. You know, you may have, I don't know, let's just pick the Methodist. I don't know why I'm picking on the Methodist. I have nothing against Methodists. It's just coming to mind for some reason. You know, say there's an abuse problem at the local Methodist church in town. You know, say 10, 15, let's go crazy. 20% of the people there have been abused in some fashion. Compared to the entirety of the Methodist Church in the United States, that's small. That's a small number of people. Compared to the number of Christians in the United States, that's a very small number of people. Compared to all the Protestants, that's a very small number of people. Even if it was 20% throughout the entire Methodist Church, compared to all of the Protestants in the United States, it's still an extremely small number of people. So you may have one particular church that has a massive problem, much worse than the Catholic Church has, but because of just the absolute numbers involved, it's going to seem much less. So anyway, there's that. The fact that structure can, the fact that the Protestant churches are much more split up, that the fact that they can be, the fact that a guy can hide and sort of move himself in a way from congregation to congregation. That's part of what makes up the seems like the Catholic Church is such a bigger problem, because it is a relatively coherent church throughout the entire country, throughout the entire world. So anything that happens in one place gets talked about in another, just about no matter how far away it is, because we're all one church. And it would maybe someday get into the definition of church. Anyway, I'm in danger of rambling excessively. The other big cause, this isn't part of the seams. This is part of this problem that is contributing to the crisis in the church, big time. Not just the way it looks, but the way it actually is. And that, frankly, as you may have heard from other places, homosexuality. It's not popular, I know, but it's a fact. Look at the stats from anyone that's done stats, and it's almost all priests, older men going after younger boys, and not so young that they're prepubescent. Usually they are post-pubescent, often well into their teens. So yeah, that's essentially they're dirty old gay men, basically, as opposed to straight up pedophiles. In fact, they came up with it feels like an invented term, to be perfectly honest, to avoid saying homosexuality, but I believe the term is hemophilia, where you're attracted to essentially teenagers, especially younger teenagers. Like I said, I honestly feel like that term was invented just to avoid calling it homosexuality. But that they used that term hemophilia in the John Jay report from back in the early 2000s. That really looked at this, and again, almost all of the cases are that. Almost every single one. There are a few that are younger, like prepubescent boys. This is true. There are a few young girls who were also abused. You know, this is not to minimize anything that they've gone through at all, not in the slightest. Hope you remember what I think was pretty visible, if contained, anger when I had to mention that a priest had raped a 7-year-old girl on a hospital bed. Yeah, it would be best if I never met that person. Anyway, so yes, we have a big thing with homosexuals in the church abusing people again. And I want to be clear, I'm not saying that all homosexuals are people who abuse other people. I'm not saying that remotely, not in the slightest at all. All I'm saying is that most of the abuse in the church is homosexual abuse, actually. Not even that every priest who is a homosexual is an abuser. Certainly not saying that. In fact, I happen to know of a priest who, at one point, before he became a priest, was a practicing homosexual. Dude's a fantastic priest. One of the best, actually. He's really, 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 really good. And is 100% faithful to the church's teaching on everything, for as far as I know. In any case, so what do you do about that? You don't. Well, one, the church actually already did address it way back in the early 2000s. It's like, okay, she looked at the data. It's like, you know what? This is a lot of homosexual issues going on here. So they decided, if you have homosexual tendencies, thou shalt not be a priest. Plain and simple. Now, if you are already a priest and there haven't been any problems, the church was like, you know what? Fine. Just keep it that way. We're good. But the church stopped, or at least was supposed to stop, who knows if that's actually true, stopped accepting people with homosexual tendencies into seminaries back in the early 2000s. There was a lot of controversy about it at the time. I think, especially in light of the new data about McCarrick, and also with the grand jury report out of Pittsburgh, I think it was a good call. If you've got certain tendencies, it's and you're in a situation where it's going to be easier to act on them, why even take the chance? Call it a sort of version of the Pence rule, if you will. But, so I guess the next question is, why are there so many homosexual priests in the church? A good question. There's a lot of potential reasons for that. I've never heard one that sounded great, that sounded like it was the silver bullet explanation that just made sense of everything. These include things like, if you're a Catholic man and you feel attracted to men, well, the church is going to want, and you want to be a faithful Catholic, well, then you're going to be celibate. Might as well be a priest. There might be a handful that looked at it and said, oh, I'm going to have some access there. Nice. Honestly, I don't think that's very many. Maybe a small handful. Another theory, this wades into conspiracy theory territory, fair warning, but I heard this from Michael Voris on Louder with Crowder recently, addressing the same issue. Apparently, back in the day, Stalin had directed the infiltration of Catholic seminaries by homosexuals. Let's assume this was true, or maybe it was Lenin. I don't remember which one, but so we're going back to the first half of the 20th century here with this. Why are there still so many then? Plain and simple, they recruit each other. Even the ones who don't know, who aren't part of some mission, which is probably most of them. It's entirely possible they were recruited, they were recruited by people who might have known the mission, known the plan, but didn't feel any need to pass that on. All we need to do, they would have been saying, is to recruit people who will wind up corrupting and discrediting the church. I'm not saying 100% believe that, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. The Soviet Union had lots of hate for the Catholic Church throughout its entire existence. I mean, you saw that in the way the Catholic Church was cracked down on, by the communists. Excuse me, good. You saw that in a lot of different ways, and I don't want to get into that. That's not the point of these videos. So anyway, that is the big thing. For whatever reason, there are probably a disproportionate number of homosexual priests within the Catholic Church. They are guilty of most of the abuse. It's just plain and simple. Again, not all homosexuals, obviously. Not the vast majority. I'm not saying that either. Certainly not. All I'm saying is that there is a correlation here within the context of the Catholic Church. You can leave it right there, and that's fine. And anyway, so we've got them. They're the ones that are doing most of it. How do we get a handle on this? Because I fully realize none of these explanations really explain much. We're still sort of just describing the situation, other than the one that I led with in the last video, that essentially the devil hates the church and he will use means to go after her. Rather simple. But now in the next video, it's time to start looking at how we get past this. How do we fix this issue? How do we stop this from happening? Especially, regardless, not especially. Just we need to end this, plain and simple. So the next video is going to be on that. We're going to look at things that we can do to address this issue and hopefully fix it. Nothing's really fixed once and for all, but fix it. And then after that, we'll look again at what's going on with the hierarchy, what's going on with Pope Francis and everything. And then if need be, the last one will be sort of a wrap-up, looking at all of the different, all of the news and everything that has come out since this broke. So again, thank you for tuning in. And I hope to be able to get part 4 of this out to you a little bit sooner than this one. And until then, Godspeed and keep fighting the good fight. I just need to get my mouse over so I can hit the stop button.